The sound of ice cracking under her knees was the last thing Penelope Barrett heard before her vision started to blur. And she realized with a terrible clarity that this frozen creek in the Montana wilderness would be her grave unless a miracle happened in the next few minutes. Her fingers had stopped hurting an hour ago, which she knew was a bad sign. The November cold of 1882 had swept through the mountains surrounding Helena with a vengeance that week, catching her completely unprepared when her horse had thrown her 3 miles back and bolted into the woods. She had been trying to reach the creek for water, thinking she could follow it downstream to civilization, but her legs had given out at the water's edge. Now she knelt there, shaking so violently her teeth rattled, staring at her pale reflection in the shallow water that ran between sheets of ice. She tried to stand, but her body would not obey. The world tilted sideways and she fell against the frozen bank, her dark hair spilling across the snow. Somewhere in the distance, she heard the call of a hawk, sharp and clear in the thin mountain air. Then she heard something else, something that made her heart lurch with desperate hope. Hoofbeats, Jesus Christ. The voice came from above her, rough with shock and concern. "Madam, madam, can you hear me?" Penelope tried to answer, but her jaw was locked tight with cold. She managed to turn her head slightly and saw a man dismounting from a large bay horse, his movements quick and purposeful. He wore a heavy sheepskin coat and a dark hat pulled low against the wind, and even in her deteriorating state, she registered that he was tall and broad-shouldered. "I have got you," he said, dropping to his knees beside her. "You are going to be all right now. I promise you that." She felt strong arms slide beneath her and lift her as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. The movement sent a wave of pain through her frozen limbs, and she gasped, the first sound she had made. He held her against his chest, and she could feel the warmth of him even through their layers of clothing. It was the most wonderful thing she had ever experienced. "My camp is just over that ridge," he told her, carrying her toward his horse. 5 minutes. You can hold on for 5 minutes, cannot you?" She wanted to tell him yes, wanted to thank him, wanted to ask his name, but all she could manage was another violent shiver. He made a sound low in his throat, something between worry and determination, and somehow managed to mount his horse while still holding her. He settled her across his lap, wrapping his coat around both of them as best he could, and urged the horse into a careful trot. True to his word, they crested the ridge in minutes and descended into a small sheltered hollow where a campfire burned cheerfully beside a canvas tent. The sight of those flames made Penelope want to weep with relief. The cowboy dismounted in one fluid motion and carried her straight to the fire, setting her down gently on a bedroll he had dragged close to the heat. "I need to get these wet clothes off you," he said, already reaching for the buttons of her coat. "I know it is not proper, but you will die if I do not." She managed a tiny nod. Proper did not matter when you were freezing to death. He worked quickly but carefully, peeling away her sodden coat and dress with hands that were surprisingly gentle for their size. When he got down to her chemise and drawers, he hesitated, his jaw tight. "I am going to wrap you in blankets now," he said, averting his eyes as he reached for his bedroll. "The important thing is to warm you gradually. Too fast and it can be just as dangerous as the cold." He cocooned her in wool blankets, then added his own coat on top. She was still shaking, but already she could feel the fire's heat beginning to penetrate the terrible coldness that had settled into her bones. He knelt beside her and began to rub her hands between his own, the friction helping to restore circulation. The pain as feeling returned was excruciating, and this time she did cry out. "I know," he said quietly. "I know it hurts. That means the blood is flowing again. That is a good thing." She focused on his face as he worked, using it as an anchor against the pain. He was probably around 28 or 30, with strong features weathered by sun and wind, a straight nose, and a firm mouth. His eyes were the color of creek water in summer, a clear green-gray that seemed to see right through her. Dark stubble shadowed his jaw, and his brown hair curled slightly where it touched his collar. There was something solid about him, something that made her feel safe even though she knew nothing about him except that he had saved her life. "What is your name?" she finally managed to whisper, her voice hoarse and shaky. "Garrett Coleman," he answered, relief flashing across his face at the sound of her voice. "And you are Penelope Barrett. Well, Miss Barrett, what in God's name were you doing out here alone in this weather?" It was a fair question. Penelope closed her eyes briefly, summoning the energy to explain. "I was riding from Helena to my brother's ranch. I thought I could make it before the weather turned. My horse spooked at something and threw me. He ran off with all my supplies." Garrett's expression darkened. "You were traveling alone. No escort. My brother was supposed to meet me in town, but he never arrived. I waited 3 days. I thought perhaps he had been delayed and expected me to make my own way. The ranch is only supposed to be 15 miles from Helena." She coughed, and he immediately reached for a canteen, holding it to her lips. The water was cold but clean, and she drank gratefully. "Supposed to be," Garrett repeated grimly. "Did you have a map?" "Yes, it was in my saddlebag." "So you have been wandering lost in addition to everything else." He shook his head. "You are lucky I was checking my trap lines. Another hour and I would have been headed back to town." "How far are we from Helena?" "About 8 miles as the crow flies. Longer by trail." He moved from her hands to her feet, rubbing them through the blankets with the same steady pressure. Penelope bit her lip against the pain but did not cry out again. "What is your brother's name? I might know him." "Thomas Barrett. He has a cattle ranch somewhere to the east of Helena." Garrett's hands stilled for just a moment. "Tom Barrett, with the Triple B spread." "Yes, that is him. Do you know him?" "We have met a few times in town." Something in Garrett's tone made Penelope uneasy, but she was too exhausted to pursue it. The warmth of the fire and blankets was making her drowsy now that the worst of the cold was lifting. Her eyelids felt heavy. "Do not fall asleep yet," Garrett said sharply. "I need to make sure you are truly warming up and not going into shock. Stay awake and talk to me. Tell me about yourself." Penelope forced her eyes open. "What do you want to know? Where are you from originally? You do not sound like Montana-born." "Philadelphia. My father was a banker. He died last year and left debts instead of inheritance. My mother passed when I was young. Thomas came west 5 years ago and made his fortune in cattle. He sent for me when he heard about father's situation." "So you traveled all the way from Philadelphia to Montana on your own?" "I am 22 years old, Mr. Coleman, perfectly capable of traveling by train and stage." A hint of a smile touched his mouth. "I did not mean to question your capability, Miss Barrett. You have clearly got courage, even if your judgment in riding out alone was questionable." She wanted to be offended, but he was right. "What about you? Are you a trapper?" "Sometimes. I do whatever work needs doing. I have a small property about 3 miles from here where I run a few head of cattle. In winter, I trap and hunt, sell the furs in town. In summer, I sometimes hire out as a hand on the bigger ranches when they need extra help." He added more wood to the fire, which crackled and sent up a shower of sparks. "It is not fancy, but it is an honest living." "I did not mean to sound dismissive," Penelope said quickly. "I am grateful for whatever work led you to check those trap lines today. You saved my life." Garrett met her eyes across the fire. "Anyone would have done the same. But it was not anyone. It was you." She held his gaze until he looked away, seeming uncomfortable with her gratitude. Interesting. As the afternoon wore into evening, Garrett proved to be an efficient caretaker. He heated water over the fire and made her drink cup after cup of weak tea, explaining that she needed to get warm from the inside as well as outside. He cooked salt pork and beans for dinner, and insisted she eat even though her stomach was still queasy from the ordeal. He hung her wet clothes on a line strung between two trees, positioning them where the fire's heat would dry them overnight. Through it all, he maintained a respectful distance, never touching her unless necessary, never looking at her in a way that made her uncomfortable. Penelope found herself studying him when he was not watching, noting the competent way he moved around the camp, the care he took with small tasks. She had known plenty of men in Philadelphia, bankers and businessmen who wore fine suits and spoke in cultivated tones. None of them had ever made her feel as safe as this rough cowboy with his simple camp and steady hands. "I should take you back to Helena tomorrow," Garrett said as darkness fell. "You can rest tonight and we will leave at first light. The ride will take most of the day, but we should make it before dark if the weather holds. What about my brother? We can send word to his ranch from town. He can collect you there." Again that odd note in his voice when he spoke of Thomas. "You do not like him," Penelope said bluntly. "My brother? Why?" Garrett was silent for a long moment, staring into the fire. "I do not know your brother well enough to like or dislike him," he finally said, "but I know men who work for him. The Triple B has a reputation for being a hard place." "What does that mean?" "It means he works his hands near to death and pays them poorly. It means he has run off smaller ranchers by damming up water that used to flow freely. It means he is not well loved in these parts." Garrett looked at her, his expression serious. "I am sorry to speak ill of your kin, but you asked." Penelope absorbed this in troubled silence. She knew so little about Thomas, really. He had left Philadelphia when she was 17, and his letters over the years had been brief and infrequent. She had come west imagining a joyful reunion with the brother she remembered from childhood, the one who had taught her to fish and told her stories. Perhaps that brother no longer existed. "I appreciate your honesty," she said quietly. "You should rest now," Garrett said, rising to his feet. "You can have the tent. I will sleep out here by the fire." "I cannot take your tent." "Yes, you can. You need proper rest after what you have been through." He ducked inside the small canvas structure and emerged with another blanket and a bedroll. "I have slept outside in worse weather than this." Penelope was too tired to argue further. With Garrett's help, she made her way into the tent, still wrapped in her cocoon of blankets. Inside it was warmer than she expected, sheltered from the wind, and the blankets Garrett had laid out made a comfortable bed. She settled down with a sigh and felt the exhaustion of the day crash over her all at once. "Mr. Coleman," she called softly. His shadow appeared at the tent opening. "Yes, thank you for everything." There was a pause. "Sleep well, Miss Barrett." She did sleep, deeply and dreamlessly, her body finally able to relax now that it was safe and warm. When she woke, the sun was just beginning to lighten the eastern sky, and she could smell coffee brewing over the fire. She sat up carefully, pleased to find that while she was sore and stiff, the terrible coldness was gone. Her fingers and toes all moved properly. She had been incredibly lucky. She emerged from the tent to find Garrett crouched by the fire, cooking what looked like flapjacks in a cast iron skillet. He glanced up at her approach and quickly stood. "How are you feeling?" "Better. Much better." She looked at the fire, the tent, the horses contentedly grazing nearby. "You have been up for a while. I wanted to get an early start. Your clothes are dry." He gestured to the line where her dress and coat hung. "They are a bit stiff but wearable. I will, turn around while you change." He was true to his word, keeping his back turned while Penelope quickly shed the blankets and pulled on her underlayers and dress. The fabric was indeed stiff, and there was a tear in the skirt she had not noticed before, but it felt wonderful to be properly clothed again. She did up the buttons of her coat and cleared her throat. "I am decent." Garrett turned and handed her a tin plate with several flapjacks and a piece of bacon. "Eat up. We have a long ride ahead." They ate quickly and efficiently, washing down the simple meal with strong black coffee. Then Garrett broke camp with practiced ease, packing everything onto his horse and scattering the fire. Within 20 minutes, they were ready to go. "You will ride with me," he said, mounting first and then reaching down to pull her up behind him. "Hold on around my waist and try to move with the horse's motion." Penelope wrapped her arms around his solid torso, intensely aware of the warmth and strength of him. She could feel his muscles shift as he settled into the saddle and gathered the reins. Then they were moving, the horse picking its way carefully up the ridge and onto a trail that led northwest through the forest. The ride to Helena was every bit as long as Garrett had predicted. The mountain trails were rough and in some places treacherous with ice. Garrett navigated them with calm confidence, letting the horse set its own pace, never rushing. They stopped once to rest the horse and eat some jerky from Garrett's saddlebags, but otherwise they pressed on steadily. Penelope found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the ride, her body fitting naturally against Garrett's back. They did not talk much beyond occasional practical exchanges. She was acutely conscious of every point where her body touched his, and she thought perhaps he was too, because there was a tension in his shoulders that had nothing to do with managing the horse. "Why did you come west?" she asked at one point, breaking a long silence. He was quiet for a moment. "I grew up in Kansas on a farm that barely produced enough to keep us fed. When I was 18, my father died and my mother remarried a man who made it clear there was not room for me anymore, so I headed west to make my own way. That was 10 years ago. Do you ever regret it?" "No. This land is hard, but it is honest. You get out of it what you put in. I like that." He paused. "What about you? Do you think you will like Montana?" "I do not know yet," Penelope admitted. "It is very different from Philadelphia, more wild, more beautiful in some ways, but also more dangerous." "It is both of those things," Garrett agreed. "It is not a place for the faint of heart, but it has a way of getting into your blood, making you part of it." There was something almost poetic in the way he said it, and Penelope found herself smiling against his back. "You love it here," she said. "I do." They rode on through the afternoon, watching the sun track across the sky. The forest gradually gave way to more open terrain, and then they crested a final hill and Helena spread out before them in the valley below. It was a bustling town of several thousand people, the buildings a mix of wood and brick, smoke rising from countless chimneys. The main street was wide and lined with shops and saloons, and the Helena Hotel, which Garrett informed her was the finest accommodation in town. "That is where I will take you," he said. "You can get a room and send word to your brother from there." "How much will a room cost?" "A few dollars for a decent one." Penelope bit her lip. She had some money left from her traveling funds, but not much. She would need to be careful until she reached Thomas. "Perhaps there is somewhere less expensive." Garrett twisted in the saddle to look at her, his eyes searching her face. "Are you short on funds?" She felt her cheeks heat with embarrassment. "I have enough to manage, I just need to be prudent." He turned back without comment, but she saw his jaw tighten. They rode into town as dusk was falling, the street lamps just beginning to glow. Garrett navigated through the busy streets to the hotel, a 2-story building with a painted sign and glass windows. He dismounted and helped Penelope down, his hands firm on her waist. "Wait here," he said, and went inside. He returned a few minutes later with a key. "Room 12 upstairs. I paid for 3 nights. That should give your brother time to collect you." Penelope stared at him. "Mr. Coleman, I cannot accept that. I have money. Keep your money. You might need it." He pressed the key into her hand. "Consider it part of saving your life. What good is it to pull you out of a frozen creek if you end up sleeping in a boarding house with bed bugs? But this is too much." "It is done." His tone made it clear the discussion was over. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a few bills. "This is for meals. The hotel has a dining room. Eat properly." Now Penelope felt tears prick her eyes, overwhelmed by his generosity. "I do not know how to thank you." "You do not need to thank me." He shifted uncomfortably. "I am just doing what is right." "Will I see you again?" The question came out before she could stop it, and she saw something flicker in his eyes. Surprise maybe, or hope, or perhaps just caution. "I come into town every week or so for supplies. I suppose we might run into each other." It was not a promise, but it was not a dismissal either. Penelope made herself smile. "I hope we do. Take care of yourself, Miss Barrett." He tipped his hat to her, a gesture that was old-fashioned and courtly despite his rough appearance. Then he mounted his horse and rode away down the street, the shadows swallowing him long before he turned the corner. Penelope stood there for a long moment, watching the space where he had been. Then she took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and went inside to claim her room. The hotel was indeed fine, with carpet on the floors and oil paintings on the walls. The clerk gave her a curious look when she presented her key, but said nothing. Room 12 was small but clean, with a real bed, a washstand, and a window that overlooked the street. Penelope set down the bundle of her still damp saddlebags that Garrett had retrieved before leaving camp, and sank onto the bed with a sigh. She was safe. She was warm. She was alive, thanks to Garrett Coleman. She lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, her mind full of green-gray eyes and strong, careful hands. She barely knew the man. She had no reason to feel this pull toward him, this sense that something important had just walked out of her life. And yet she did. "Foolish," she whispered to herself. He was just being kind. But she did not believe it. There had been something in the way he looked at her, in the way his voice softened when he spoke to her, something that matched the feeling growing in her own chest. She fell asleep thinking about him, and dreamed of campfires and mountain trails and the warmth of strong arms holding her safe. The next morning, Penelope sent a telegram to the Triple B Ranch, informing Thomas of her arrival in Helena and her current location. Then she had breakfast in the hotel dining room, feeling self-conscious in her stained and rumpled dress among the other guests in their finer clothes. The meal was substantial, though. Eggs and toast and real butter, and she ate every bite. Afterward, she walked the main street of Helena, getting a sense of the town that was supposed to be her nearest settlement. It was loud and busy, full of miners and ranchers and businessmen all rushing about their affairs. She saw several saloons doing brisk business even at midday, and a number of shops selling everything from dry goods to mining equipment. There was a church with a white steeple, a schoolhouse, and a newspaper office. It was a real town, civilized in its way, but with an edge of wildness that Philadelphia had never possessed. She bought a few necessities at the general store, spending her money carefully. The proprietor, a friendly woman named Mrs. Chen, asked if she was new in town, and Penelope found herself telling a carefully edited version of her story. Mrs. Chen clicked her tongue sympathetically when she heard about the accident. "You were lucky someone found you," she said, wrapping Penelope's purchases in brown paper. "That country is unforgiving in winter. Who was it that helped you?" "A man named Garrett Coleman." Mrs. Chen's face brightened. "Garrett? Oh, he is a good man, very honest. He brings his furs to my husband's trading post, always fair in his dealings." She leaned forward conspiratorially. "And handsome, too, if you do not mind me saying so." Penelope felt her cheeks warm. I suppose he is. You suppose? Mrs. Chen laughed. My dear, half the unmarried women in town have set their cap at him at one time or another. He is very polite but never seems interested. People say he is married to his independence. This information settled into Penelope's chest with a complicated weight. So he was not courting anyone. That was good. But he apparently had no interest in being courted. That was less good. Well, I am grateful to him regardless, Penelope said, taking her package. Thank you for your help, Mrs. Chen. She spent the rest of the day exploring the town and resting in her room. By evening there had been no response from Thomas. She told herself not to worry. The ranch was some distance away, and perhaps he had been out on the range when her telegram arrived. He would surely come tomorrow. But tomorrow came and went with no word, and the day after that. On the third day, Penelope went back to the telegraph office and sent another message, this one more urgent. The operator, a thin man with spectacles, looked at her sympathetically. Having trouble reaching your brother, it seems so. Is it possible my telegrams are not getting through? We have got a wire that runs straight to the Triple B. If we send it, they receive it. He adjusted his spectacles. Of course, receiving and acting on are two different things. Penelope frowned. What do you mean? The operator seemed to realize he had said too much. Nothing, miss. I am sure he will respond soon. But Penelope could not shake the uneasy feeling that settled over her. Combined with what Garrett had said about Thomas's reputation, she was beginning to wonder what kind of man her brother had become. That evening, she was eating a solitary dinner in the hotel dining room when a commotion at the entrance made her look up. A group of men had entered, loud and rough, clearly having come from one of the saloons. At their center was a man in his early 30s wearing expensive clothes and a black hat, his face flushed with drink and good humor. As they passed her table, his gaze fell on her, and he stopped. Well now, he said, his words only slightly slurred. I do not believe I have seen you before, pretty lady. Are you new in town? Penelope set down her fork carefully. I am just passing through. Passing through to where? He stepped closer, and she caught the strong smell of whiskey. Maybe I can help you get there. I do not require assistance, thank you. One of his companions, a leaner man with a scar across his cheek, laughed. She has got spirit, Jack. I like that. I like it too, Jack said, grinning. He reached out as if to touch her hair, and Penelope leaned back sharply. Please leave me alone. Oh, come now, I am just being friendly. His grin widened. You look like you could use a friend in this town. The lady asked you to leave her alone. The new voice came from behind Jack, calm but with an edge of steel beneath it. I suggest you do so. Penelope's heart leaped as she recognized that voice. Jack turned, his expression darkening as he saw who had spoken. Coleman. Should have known you would stick your nose in where it does not belong. Garrett stood just inside the dining room entrance, his hat in his hands, his eyes cold. Walk away, Jack. Or what? You will make me. Jack took a step toward Garrett, his chest puffing out. His friends moved to flank him, and Penelope felt her stomach clench with fear. But Garrett did not move, did not even tense. He just looked at Jack with that same cold, steady gaze until Jack faltered and glanced away. You are not worth the trouble, Jack muttered. He turned and stalked toward the stairs, his friends following. But at the landing he paused and looked back at Penelope. Watch yourself, pretty lady. Coleman is not the hero you think he is. Then they were gone, boots thundering up the stairs. Penelope let out a shaky breath and realized her hands were trembling. Garrett crossed to her table in 3 long strides. Are you all right? Yes, thank you again. She tried to smile, but it came out wobbly. You have a talent for arriving just when I need help. I came to see if you had heard from your brother yet. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat without asking permission, his eyes still scanning the room as if expecting more trouble. "I take it you have not." "No, I have sent 2 telegrams with no response." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I am beginning to think he may not want me here after all." Garrett's jaw tightened. "Or he is too busy with his ranch to care that his sister is stranded in town. Either way, it is unacceptable. What am I supposed to do? I cannot stay here indefinitely. I paid for 3 nights and those are up today. I know. That is why I came." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "I have a proposal for you, Miss Barrett, and I want you to hear me out before you answer." Penelope felt something flutter in her chest. "All right. My property is small, but it is sturdy. I have a cabin with 2 rooms. You could stay there in the spare room until your brother responds. It would be proper, separate sleeping quarters, and you would be safe. I am gone most days checking traps and hunting, so you would have privacy, and you would not be spending money you do not have on hotel rooms." Penelope stared at him. "You are inviting me to stay at your home." "I am inviting you to stay in my spare room until you can reach your brother. That is all." But there was color rising in his cheeks, and she knew it was not quite all. "I know it is not entirely proper, but you do not have many options right now. And I give you my word that I will behave as a gentleman at all times." "I do not doubt that," Penelope said quietly. "You have been nothing but kind and respectful since the moment you found me. But Mr. Coleman, what will people think? Honestly, I do not much care what people think. But if it matters to you, we can tell anyone who asks that you are my cousin visiting from back east. Your cousin. It is a reasonable story. Plenty of people have family visiting from elsewhere." He met her eyes. "Look, I know this is unusual. But I cannot in good conscience leave you here to deal with men like Jack, whatever his name is, while you wait for a brother who may or may not show up. At least at my place you would be safe and it would cost you nothing." Put that way, it made sense. And if Penelope was honest with herself, the idea of spending more time with Garrett Coleman was far more appealing than it should be, which was probably exactly why she should say no. "Yes," she heard herself say instead. "Thank you, I accept your offer." Relief flooded his face. "Good. Can you be ready to leave in an hour? We can reach my place before full dark if we leave soon." "I will be ready." They rode out of Helena as the sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. This time Penelope rode more confidently behind Garrett, no longer self-conscious about holding onto him. The trail led south and east into rolling foothills covered with pine and aspen. It was beautiful country, wild and open in a way that still made her breath catch. Garrett's property sat in a small valley watered by a spring-fed stream. The cabin was log-built and solid, larger than she had expected, with a stone chimney and a small porch. Behind it was a barn and a corral where several horses and a few cattle grazed peacefully. Smoke rose from the chimney, which puzzled Penelope until Garrett explained. "I keep a fire banked when I am away so the cabin stays warm. Makes it easier to heat up again when I return." He helped her down from the horse and led her inside. The cabin was simple but comfortable, with a large main room that served as kitchen and living area, and 2 smaller rooms off to the side. One was clearly Garrett's bedroom, visible through an open door. The other had a closed door, and he opened it to reveal a small but tidy space with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a window with real glass. "This was meant to be a guest room, but I have not had guests," he said, lighting the oil lamp on the dresser. "There are extra blankets in the trunk at the foot of the bed. Help yourself to anything you need." "It is perfect," Penelope said honestly. "Thank you, Mr. Coleman. I think at this point you can call me Garrett. Then you should call me Penelope." He smiled, really smiled, and it transformed his face from merely handsome to something that made her heart skip. "Penelope, it suits you. Pretty and a bit old-fashioned. I was named for my grandmother. Well, she must have been quite a woman if you take after her." He cleared his throat and stepped back. "I will make us some supper. Nothing fancy, but it will be hot and filling." He was as good as his word, producing a stew of venison and root vegetables that had been simmering over the fire all day. They ate at the rough-hewn table, making conversation that came easier now that they were past the initial awkwardness. Garrett told her about his property, his plans to expand his herd, his hopes of building a larger barn by next summer. Penelope found herself relaxing, smiling, even laughing at his dry observations about his more difficult cattle. After supper, she helped him wash the dishes, the domesticity of it feeling strangely natural. When the work was done, Garrett banked the fire and bid her good night, disappearing into his own room and firmly closing the door. Penelope retired to her small room and changed into the nightgown she had packed, then sat on the bed and tried to process everything that had happened. 3 days ago, she had been freezing to death beside a creek. Now she was staying in the home of a man she barely knew, a man who made her feel things she had no business feeling. It was madness, and yet it felt more right than anything had in a long time. She fell asleep to the sound of wind in the pines and the distant call of an owl, and for the first time since leaving Philadelphia, she felt something like peace. The next days fell into a pattern. Garrett would rise before dawn and set out to check his trap lines, returning in late afternoon with whatever game he had caught. Penelope would spend the mornings tidying the cabin and preparing simple meals from his stores, and the afternoons exploring the area around the property. It was good to have work to do, to feel useful rather than like a burden. In the evenings they would eat together and talk, really talk. Garrett was a good listener, and he asked thoughtful questions about her life in Philadelphia, her work helping her father at the bank before his death, her love of reading. In turn, she learned about his life, the hard years after leaving Kansas, the various jobs he had worked before saving enough to buy this land. He spoke of Montana with a passion that was quietly infectious, describing the change of seasons, the wildlife, the satisfaction of building something with his own hands, and gradually, imperceptibly, something shifted between them. The conversations grew longer. The silences became comfortable. Penelope caught herself watching him as he worked, admiring the efficient way he moved, the strength in his hands. She saw him watching her too, his eyes following her as she moved about the cabin, an expression on his face that made her breath catch. One evening about a week after she had arrived, they were sitting by the fire after supper when Garrett said, "I rode into Helena yesterday while you were resting, checked at the telegraph office." Penelope looked up from the sock she was mending. "And still no response from your brother." His mouth was a grim line. "I also asked some questions. Turns out Tom Barrett left for Denver 2 weeks ago on business. He is not expected back for another 2 weeks at least." Penelope set down the sock, feeling something heavy settle in her stomach. "So he left before I even arrived. And he never sent word to tell me. It seems that way. He invited me here," she said, her voice tight with hurt and anger. "He sent me money for the journey. He wrote that he wanted me to come live with him, that we could be a family again, and then he just left." Garrett leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I am sorry, Penelope. I wish I could explain it, but I cannot. Some men get so caught up in their own affairs that they forget what matters. Family should matter." She blinked hard against the sting of tears. "I gave up everything to come here. I sold what little I had, said goodbye to the few friends I still had left. All because my brother said he needed me here, that he wanted me here. Maybe he did. Maybe he still does, but he has done a poor job of showing it. Penelope looked at Garrett and found him watching her with such gentleness in his eyes that something inside her cracked open. "What am I going to do? You are going to stay here as long as you need to. When your brother returns, we will figure out the next step. But you are not alone, Penelope." "You have me," he paused, seeming to weigh his words, "for as long as you want." The way he said it made her heart pound. "Garrett, I know this is complicated," he said quietly. "I know we have only known each other a short time. But I need you to know that having you here these past days, it has been good, better than good. The cabin feels different with you in it, feels like a home instead of just a place I sleep." Penelope could not breathe. "I feel it too. I should not, it is too soon, but I do." He rose from his chair and crossed to where she sat, kneeling beside her so they were at eye level. "Tell me to back away and I will. Tell me this is just gratitude on your part, that you do not feel what I feel, and I will never mention it again. We can just be friends, or I can take you back to Helena tomorrow if you prefer. But if there is any chance you feel even a fraction of what I am feeling, I need to know." She looked into his eyes, those green-gray eyes that had been the first thing she saw when she thought she was dying, and knew she could not lie. "I feel it. God help me, I do." The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise. "Can I kiss you?" "Yes." He cupped her face in his hands, his palms rough and warm against her skin, and kissed her with a gentleness that made her want to weep. His lips were soft and he tasted like the coffee they had shared after dinner. And when she kissed him back, she felt him make a sound low in his throat. The kiss deepened but remained tender, questioning, a promise rather than a demand. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Garrett rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that since the moment I saw you in that hotel dining room," he admitted. "Only then." She teased breathlessly. "All right, since about the second day you were here, maybe the first, I am not sure anymore." He pulled back to look at her. "This is crazy, is it not, completely?" "I do not care, neither do I." They kissed again, and this time when they parted, Garrett stood and drew her to her feet, holding her close. They stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other in the firelight, neither willing to break the spell. Eventually, Garrett stepped back reluctantly. "You should get some rest," he said. "I have to be up early tomorrow." "What are you checking tomorrow?" "The North Line. There are some sets up in the high country that I need to pull before the next snow." He brushed a strand of hair back from her face. "Will you be all right here alone for the day?" "I have been alone every day," she pointed out. "I know, but that was before this." He gestured between them. "Now I am going to worry. Do not worry, I will be fine." She stood on her toes and kissed his cheek. "Be safe, always." She went to her room reluctantly, every part of her wanting to stay with him. But she knew they needed to take this slowly, to be sure it was real and not just proximity and circumstance. Though in her heart she already knew. This was real. This was right. Garrett Coleman was the man she was meant to find, even if she had to nearly freeze to death to do it. The next morning Garrett was gone before dawn as promised. Penelope went about her usual routine, but everything felt different now, charged with new meaning. She was not just tidying a cabin, she was caring for Garrett's home. She was not just cooking a meal, she was making sure he would have hot food when he returned. Everything she did was an act of affection, of building something together. She was outside hanging wash on the line she had strung between two trees when she heard riders approaching. For a moment her heart leaped, thinking Garrett had returned early. But these were multiple horses and they were coming fast. She shaded her eyes and felt her stomach drop as she recognized the man in the lead. Thomas Barrett looked like an older, harder version of the brother she remembered. He was tall and fair-haired like her, but where she was slender, He was barrel-chested and thick through the shoulders. His face was weathered and there were hard lines around his mouth. He rode up to the cabin and dismounted, his two companions staying on their horses. "Penelope," he said, and his voice was the same at least, the one familiar thing about him. "I got your telegrams finally." "What in God's name are you doing out here?" "Hello, Thomas." She set down the shirt she had been hanging. "It is good to see you too." He had the grace to look abashed. "I am sorry, it has been a long ride. But seriously, what are you doing at Coleman's place?" "Garrett saved my life and then gave me shelter when you did not respond to my messages. I have been here a week." Thomas's expression darkened. "You have been staying here, alone with him. He has been nothing but a gentleman." "That is not the point. Do you have any idea how it looks, you staying here unchaperoned?" Penelope felt anger kindle in her chest. "I know exactly how it looks. It looks like my brother could not be bothered to be in town when I arrived, or to send word of his absence, or to respond when I reached out for help. It looks like a stranger showed more care for my welfare than my own family." Thomas flinched. "I am sorry about that. The Denver trip came up suddenly and I had to go. It was important business, more important than your sister. That is not fair." "Is it not?" She crossed her arms. "You wrote to me, Thomas. You said to come, that you wanted me here. I gave up everything to make this journey, and then you just disappeared." "I did not disappear. I was doing business that will secure both our futures. The ranch is doing well, but I need capital to expand. This deal in Denver will give me that capital." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she remembered from childhood. "I know I should have planned better. I should have made sure you were settled before I left, but I am here now. Are you here to take me to the ranch, of course?" "You will love it there, Penelope. I have built something really impressive." His voice filled with pride. 30,000 acres, 500 head of cattle, one of the biggest operations in the territory. She heard what Garrett had said about the Triple B, about the reputation it had. She looked at her brother and tried to see him clearly. "At what cost?" His eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" "I have heard things about your ranch, about how you treat your men, about water rights and smaller ranchers being driven out. You have been here a week and you think you know my business." Thomas's voice went cold. "Let me guess, Coleman has been filling your head with stories. Garrett has been honest with me, which is more than I can say for you." "Honest?" Thomas barked a laugh. "Coleman is a two-bit trapper who barely makes enough to survive. He is jealous of men like me who have actually made something of themselves." "That is not true." "Is it not? Did he mention that he tried to file a claim on land that I had already claimed? That he accused me of cheating him out of water rights?" Thomas stepped closer. "He has had it in for me for years, and now he has gotten his hooks into you." "No one has hooks in me," Penelope said, her voice shaking, "and I am capable of forming my own opinions. You want me to come to the ranch? Fine, but do not expect me to ignore what I have seen and heard." "What you have seen? You have seen this pathetic little property and you think you understand the real world." Thomas gestured dismissively at the cabin. "This is nothing, Penelope. This is failure dressed up as simple living. I am offering you a real home, security, a future. Do not throw that away because some cowboy turned your head." "Get off my property, Barrett." Garrett's voice cut through the air like a whip. They all turned to see him riding into the yard, his rifle visible in the saddle boot, his face like stone. He dismounted in one smooth motion and walked toward them, and there was something in the way he moved that made Thomas's men reach for their guns. "Easy," Thomas said to them. To Garrett he said, "I am just here to collect my sister. Your sister can make her own choices, and she does not look particularly eager to go with you." Garrett stopped beside Penelope, not quite touching her but close enough that she could feel his presence like a shield. Besides, you are trespassing. I will leave when Penelope comes with me. Then I guess you will be here a while." Garrett looked at Penelope. "Do you want to go with him?" It was the question she had been avoiding asking herself. Did she? Thomas was her brother, her only family. The ranch was the reason she had come west. It should be an easy answer. But when she looked at Garrett, at this man who had saved her life and opened his home to her and kissed her like she was precious, the answer was suddenly very clear. "No," she said. "I do not want to go." Thomas's face went red. "Penelope, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. You left me stranded. Garrett took me in. You have done nothing to earn my trust or loyalty in the past month. He has done everything." She took a breath. "I will come to the ranch to visit. I want to see it, to understand your life here, but I am not going to live there, not right now." "So you are going to stay here, living in sin with this man?" "I am staying here as his guest in a separate room. There is nothing sinful about it. No one will believe that." "Then they will be wrong," Garrett said flatly. "Now get on your horse and ride out. You are not welcome here." For a moment Penelope thought Thomas might actually try to fight. His hands clenched into fists and his whole body tensed. But then he looked at Garrett's face, at the absolute certainty there, and something in him deflated. "Fine," he said bitterly. "Stay here if you want, but do not come crying to me when he shows his true colors. Men like Coleman are always looking for an angle, and you are a naive girl from the city who does not know any better." "I know better than you think," Penelope said quietly. "Goodbye, Thomas." He stared at her for a long moment, then turned and mounted his horse. "You know where to find me when you change your mind," he said, and rode away, his men following. They watched until the three riders disappeared over the ridge. Then Penelope let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "Are you all right?" Garrett asked. "I do not know. I just chose you over my brother, over my own family." "You chose yourself," Garrett corrected gently. "You chose to stay where you feel safe and valued instead of going somewhere you were not sure of. That is not a betrayal. That is strength." She turned to look at him. "Did you really try to claim land he had already claimed?" "No. I filed a legal claim on open land. A month later he filed a competing claim saying he had been using it for grazing and had prior rights. He had money for lawyers, I did not, so he won." Garrett's jaw tightened. "The water rights were similar. A stream ran through both our properties. I had been using it for 2 years when suddenly he dammed it upstream and said he needed it for his cattle. Again, lawyers. Again, I lost. Why did you not tell me this before?" "Because I did not want you to think I was trying to turn you against your brother. I wanted you to make up your own mind about him." He reached out and took her hand. "Did I do the right thing letting you stay? Or am I being selfish?" Penelope squeezed his fingers. "You did the right thing. And even if it was a little selfish, I am glad, because I am being selfish too. I do not want to leave." "Then do not." He pulled her close and she went willingly, burying her face in his chest. "Stay here, stay with me. We will figure everything else out as we go. People will talk." "Let them talk. Thomas was right about one thing, it will damage my reputation." "Then marry me." Penelope jerked back to stare at him. "What?" Garrett looked as surprised as she felt, as if the words had come out without his permission. But then his expression firmed and he took both her hands in his. "Marry me. I know it is too soon. I know we have only known each other a couple of weeks, but I also know that I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. You make me want to be better, do better. You make this cabin feel like a home, and I hope that maybe you feel something similar." "I do," she whispered, "but Garrett, marriage, that is forever." "I certainly hope so. I am not interested in anything less." He searched her face. "I am not asking you to decide right now. Think about it. Take all the time you need. But know that I am serious. I want you here not as a guest or a temporary arrangement but as my wife, my partner. The person I build a life with. Penelope felt tears spill over and run down her cheeks. I do not need time. His eyes widened. You do not? No, because I already know my answer. She smiled through her tears. Yes, I will marry you, Garrett Coleman. For a moment he just stared at her as if he could not quite believe what he was hearing. Then he let out a whoop of joy and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around. She laughed, dizzy with happiness, and when he set her down, he kissed her with a passion that made her forget everything else. We will do this properly, he said when they finally broke apart. I will take you into town tomorrow and we will file the paperwork. Find a minister. Do you want a big wedding? No, just us. Just simple and real. Simple and real I can do. He cupped her face. I am going to make you happy, Penelope, I swear it. You already have. They were married 3 days later in Helena in a simple ceremony at the small church with Mrs. Chen and her husband as witnesses. Penelope wore a new dress that Mrs. Chen had helped her buy, a soft blue that brought out her eyes. Garrett wore his best shirt and a tie that he clearly was not used to, but he looked more handsome than any man had a right to. The minister said the words and they exchanged vows, and when Garrett kissed her as his wife, Penelope felt something settle into place inside her, a rightness that went bone deep. They had a small celebration dinner at the hotel, just the 4 of them, and then Garrett took her back to the cabin. Their cabin now. Their home. That night when they went to bed, it was to Garrett's room, to the big bed that would now be theirs together. He was gentle and patient, mindful of her inexperience, and when they finally came together, it was with a tenderness that made her cry. Afterward he held her close, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her shoulder. I will warm you by my fire forever, he murmured. I promised you that by the creek, even if I did not say the words out loud, and I mean to keep that promise. Penelope pressed a kiss to his chest. You already do, every day. I love you, Penelope Coleman. The name sent a thrill through her. She was Penelope Coleman now. She had a new identity, a new life, a new future. I love you too. They fell asleep tangled together, and Penelope dreamed of frozen creeks and warm fires and strong arms holding her safe. The winter passed in a blur of happiness. Penelope learned the rhythms of ranch life, helping Garrett with the endless tasks that kept a small property running. She learned to milk the cow he bought in December, to gather eggs from the chickens he had always kept, to recognize the tracks of different animals in the snow. She learned to shoot a rifle, not well but well enough to protect herself if needed. She learned to make soap and candles, to preserve food, to mend harnesses and clothing. But more than the practical skills, she learned Garrett. She learned that he was grumpy before his first coffee in the morning. She learned that he sang softly when he worked, old songs his mother had taught him. She learned that he had a scar on his shoulder from a bull that had hooked him when he was 19. She learned that he read slowly but thoughtfully, savoring every word of the few books he owned. She learned 100 small things that made him who he was, and she fell more in love with each discovery. In turn, he learned her. He learned that she woke with the sun no matter how late she had stayed up. He learned that she liked her tea with honey, that she hummed when she was content, that she had a quick mind for figures and could calculate costs and profits faster than he could. He learned that she was stubborn when she thought she was right, compassionate to any creature in need, and braver than she knew. And he loved her more with each discovery. They did see Thomas once more that winter. He came by in late January, ostensibly to check on Penelope, but really, Garrett suspected, to see if the marriage was real. He found them working together to repair a section of fence, laughing at some private joke, moving around each other with the ease of long partnership. Thomas watched them for a moment and something in his face softened. You look happy, he said to Penelope. I am. I am glad, he looked at Garrett. I suppose I should apologize for the things I said before. Suppose is not the same as doing, Garrett said evenly. Thomas grimaced. You are right, I am sorry. I was angry and I took it out on both of you. That was not fair. He turned back to Penelope. You are my sister, my only family. I want you in my life even if I have a strange way of showing it. I want that too, Penelope said carefully. But things have to change, Thomas. You cannot just disappear and expect me to be waiting when you decide to show up again. And you have to respect my choices, even if you do not agree with them. I can do that, or I can try anyway. He glanced between them. So I am really an uncle now. You two are married. We are really married, Garrett confirmed, slipping an arm around Penelope's waist in a gesture that was both possessive and protective. Thomas absorbed this, then nodded slowly. Well then, welcome to the family, Coleman. Though I guess technically you welcomed Penelope to yours. We are all family now, Penelope said. If we choose to be. I choose it, Thomas said, and he sounded like he meant it. He stayed for dinner and the conversation was stilted at first but gradually warmed. Thomas told them about his Denver deal, which had indeed been successful, and his plans for the ranch. In turn, they shared their plans for the property, Garrett's hope of expanding the herd, Penelope's idea of starting a vegetable garden in the spring. It was not perfect, but it was a start, a tentative bridge being built between old family and new. After Thomas left, Garrett pulled Penelope close. That was good of you, giving him another chance. He is my brother, and I think he really is trying. She looked up at Garrett. Besides, I am happy enough that I can afford to be generous. Are you happy? Deliriously. Are you? He kissed the top of her head. More than I ever thought possible. Spring came early that year, the snow melting.